Come tell me now, says Greenwood, of the latest news you've got. How the prisoners are escaping from the Curragh Camp at Rath. It is, says Captain Taylor, through a tunnel I declare. For we can't keep the rebels in the Curragh of Kildare. In the Curragh of Kildare, in the Curragh of Kildare. Faith, we can't keep the rebels in the Curragh of Kildare.
The Curragh Internment Camp, commonly known as Rath Camp, opened on the 1st of March 1921. It was situated near Gibbet Rath, the scene of a massacre of 350 rebels during the 1798 rebellion. Built to hold 1,000 internees, by the time it closed it held 1,500 political prisoners. The camp layout consisted of two fences, each 10 feet high and 4 feet wide, between which was a 20-foot wide corridor patrolled by sentries, which the prisoners called no man's land. At each corner of the compound were high blockhouses, from which searchlights lit up the compound. Sentries armed with rifles and machine guns manned the watchtowers 24 hours a day, calling out "all is well" on the stroke of the hour throughout the night. Inside the rectangular enclosure there were about 50 to 60 wooden huts, 20 feet by 60 feet, which served as sleeping quarters for up to 1,000 men. Negotiations for the truce began on the 11th of July 1921 in order to find a peaceful settlement to the Anglo-Irish conflict. Political prisoners, especially internees not charged with any offence, were expected to be released within days. When there was no sign of an early release, some began plotting their escape. A tunnel had been discovered by the camp guards in May, but now tunnelling began in earnest, with two rival tunnels heading towards the wire. The Rath Camp had become overcrowded and many internees were housed in tents. Subsequently, on the 5th of September 1921, the Royal Engineers began to erect a new compound for internees on the spot where the tunnel exit was planned. They also began deepening the trench, which had led to them finding the first tunnel, so it was likely that they would unearth the new tunnel. The decision to make an escape before this happened was made. While tunnelling was in progress, both groups had become aware of two rival tunnels, but had not spoken of them for fear of spies in the camp. It was agreed that one of the tunnels should be finished and used without delay. It was decided to use Brady's tunnel because it was nearer the wire. 25 men were picked from each group and certain officers from GHQ were given priority, among them Commandants Joe Vyse and Tom Byrne. The date for the escape was set for the 9th of September 1921. Jim Brady and Joe Galvin went first, as the 50 or so other selected internees waited their turn in the tunnel entrance. Brady and Galvin found that their exit hole came up short and they had to run a length of twine about 20 yards through two barbed wire entanglements. The twine would act as a guidance to the escapees in the darkness. A thick fog descended on the night of the escape. The rendezvous was in front of the Curragh Racecourse grandstand, but because of the fog, many did not make it. Some men got lost, including a group of 12 men from Roscommon who wandered around in the fog and found themselves back at the wire. They knelt down and said a decade of the rosary. As they finished praying, they heard rooks cawing in the trees nearby, and knowing the only trees near the camp were at the back of the grandstand, headed that way to safety. The escapees were assisted by local people. One group were sheltered and fed in a house at the Hill of Allen and taken across the fields to the home of Father Smith, the local curate and a Republican sympathiser in Rathangan. Local volunteers brought fresh clothes and footwear along with horses and traps to his house and conveyed the escapees to Carbery. Here they were treated to excellent hospitality by the proprietor of Weems Hotel, who put his car at their disposal and asked the driver to take them wherever they wanted to go. Byrne's bakery van carried 3 escapees from Kildare town to Lucan, where they caught a tram to Dublin. Michael Cunningham of Kildare town supplied clothing to an escaper and transported him to Dublin. At least 54 prisoners escaped that night, and despite large-scale searches by the military and the Black and Tans, none of them were caught. All of them returned to active duty within the Republican movement. IRA volunteer Patrick Tunney from Cushlough, Westport, County Mayo, and was imprisoned in the Rath Camp from which he escaped. In 1920, Hamar Greenwood became the last Chief Secretary for Ireland and was responsible for the introduction of the infamous Black and Tans. In his 1921 poem Hamar's Lament, Patrick Tunney pokes fun at both Greenwood and Captain John Taylor, the Assistant Under Secretary in Dublin Castle, over the embarrassment that the prisoners are escaping from the Curragh Camp. While the internees were celebrating the escape, negotiations to end the War of Independence were progressing and culminated in the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty in December 1921. The camp was closed and all the internees were released. Within a year of its erection, most traces of the Rath Camp, once home to 1,500 men, had disappeared from the Curragh Plains. Its fencing posts and barbed wire of the camp were used by local farmers for many years. Today, the only signs left of the camp are a few concrete foundations of its huts facing the Curragh Racecourse grandstand.
They will be past controlling soon those lawless rebels' clans. By the way they knocked our barracks down and killed our black and tans. We may have deadly weapons and barbed wire everywhere, and still they are escaping from the Curragh of Kildare. In the Curragh of Kildare, in the Curragh of Kildare. Faith, we can't keep the rebels in the Curragh of Kildare. Oh, they burned our Dublin custom house and wrecked our courts of law. Then before we were all slaughtered, says Hamar, we'll withdraw.